on the Hill happens every year, where we invite folks from across the state to join us at the state capitol here in Nashville, to talk to our legislators about issues that we care about related to the environment. And so we usually every year pick about three bills to focus on. And those bills, we do all the research, we figure out what's up, we figure out what we want to tell the legislators, and then when we're there on the Hill, which will be next Tuesday, that's what we talk to our folks about. So that's what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go over the three bills that we've chosen to focus on. Um, a couple of housekeeping things. One, this meeting is being recorded. Two, we'll have time at the end for some questions, but if you're like me and you have a question pop up and you might lose it, feel free at any time to ask a question in the chat. Jess Martin over here, our comms manager from Harpeth Conservancy, it will be all up in the chat, making notes of questions, and we'll pause periodically for her to let us know if there are questions we need to attend to. So hold on to them or put them in the chat so you don't forget them. Either one works well. Um, I know that a lot of folks who have joined us are not registered for Conservation Day on the Hill, and at the top of this session, I just want to say that that's okay. Um, Registration is closed. We have about 140 folks registered to join us next Tuesday. But at the end of this session, we'll talk a little bit about how you can stay involved outside of Day on the Hill, because there are lots of ways. So we're going to get started. We're going to talk about three bills tonight. And the folks who are joining to talk about those bills are right here. I've made sure that our email addresses are up here in case anybody wants to get in touch. We'd always love to chat about anything. We've got Maris from Tennessee Environmental Council. Welcome, welcome. We've got Grace Stranch, CEO from Harpeth Conservancy, and Scott Barrenberry from the Sierra Club. And we're going to start first off with a Tennessee wetlands bill. So, Grace, take it away. Tell us about this bill.
Hello, everyone. So many of you have probably heard about this, the wetland bill, as we call it, that has been around. Unfortunately, for the last 3 years, we've been dealing with this bill. And what this bill is predicated on is a Supreme Court decision we just call it the Sackett decision. And what the Sackett decision did is it changed the federal protections for certain wetlands, and it made wetlands that no longer had a surface connection no longer were considered protected under the Clean Water Act. So, because of that, there's a bunch of states across the US. Some had heightened protections. Some immediately lost protections for all of their wetlands that weren't connected by surface water. And why that matters is we're going to go over some of the science. I'm going to go over our fact sheet, which you'll have. But our wetlands, many of our wetlands in Tennessee are connected underground. So, our plenty of wetlands, they don't even have to be connected underground to have biological importance for how they're connected to the ecosystem. And so in Tennessee, we were lucky because under our state law, under the Tennessee Water Quality Control Act, we have our waters under public trust, and we recognize underground connections. So when the Supreme Court decision happened, we didn't lose our protections like many of our surrounding states lost their protections immediately when this decision was held. So I'm going to pull up our fact sheet so that we can go over some of the talking points of why we should protect wetlands and what we're going to be pushing.
Grace, while you're figuring that out, I feel like I should have backed up and I meant to do this and I totally forgot. If any of you joined us for our first webinar of legislative session, we did a little bit of a legislative session 101 to talk about how the Tennessee legislature works, what the process is like. And so I just wanted to give us a little pinpoint about where we are in the process. So if you'll remember, that legislative session started for us in January. Because this is the first year of a 2-year cycle. Folks who were just elected in went through orientation, had to, put their hand on the Bible, that kind of thing. So they did a 2 week, what they call an organizational session, just getting folks sworn in, figuring out the rules. And then after that, the governor called a special session. So this session got a little bit minorly delayed because of that special session, which lasted a week. And then on February 6th was the bill filing deadline. So every legislator who is going to file a bill had to do so by the 6th. So it wasn't really until after February 6th that we knew every single thing that was coming down the pipeline. But also, because it's so early on, there's still a lot that we don't know, and we're just kind of in a waiting game trying to figure out what's going on at any given time with any of those bills. So thankfully, um, now we have a little bit more information. So that's why we're able to talk a little bit more about the bills. When this session was originally scheduled for February 4th, it just wasn't possible to do it on February 4th. We didn't have all the information we needed, so that's why we postponed it. So I'm glad. Thanks for letting me catch us up. That's where we are in session, and we'll hop back into wetlands.
Yeah. And to be clear, there are many bills that we have concerns about, or there are other bills that we like. We are purposely only choosing three to focus on. There are caption bills, there are other bills that we think could even potentially be worse, but they haven't been filed yet. So when they file the bill on the 6th, they can amend it with 48 hours. Go to our legislative session 101 to learn all about that. We can talk about that later. But this bill is in place, and all three of these bills are interrelated. And so they have a really nice flow to them. And we think that all of them are simple enough that we can break down from everyone, regardless of your background. So don't be afraid to ask questions. We want to make it sure that everyone can understand this because we want to make sure our legislators can understand all of these different points. And every legislator and every person comes from different backgrounds and have different skill sets. So if we're saying things that are too complicated or you don't understand or you need it to be broken down, ask that in the chat, ask it later. And if we don't have time to get to you now, we'll make sure that we get to you later. So, wetlands. Why should we protect our wetlands? Why do wetlands matter? One, they protect our communities from flooding and pollution. This is a crucial fact that all Tennesseans should understand at this point. We had one of the largest floods and most deaths in Waverly. That wasn't necessarily because of wetlands, but wetlands can help when we do have flooding. Um, when you're going into these meetings, we want to make sure if you get any pushback on it won't cause flooding, you can just point to our emergency agency, TEMA, who has said publicly last year that they will likely result in more flooding if we don't have these wetlands. And we like to say one easy way to break this down is to say you imagine you have a sponge. And what happens when you put a ton of water? The sponge holds on to all of that water. If you don't have that sponge, that water either just goes right through, or say, for instance, you have a development that has sidewalks. You can imagine that water just hitting those sidewalks and just running on through. So they these wetlands store all of this water so that when a river is going up high, that the water goes over from the river, and those wetlands provide a storage area. So it's huge. And when you don't have those wetlands holding on to that water, what ends up happening is it ends up flooding our communities and costing a lot of money and life. So flooding, huge.
Grace, a question was asked, how does one mitigate a destroyed wetland?
So there there are let me back up real quick. This is actually a helpful question. This law doesn't mean that you can't build and that you can't get rid of the wetlands. Fortunately, right now you can still, if you want to build on a wetland, you can build on a wetland. But what this law does do is that makes you have to mitigate in another area, ideally in the same watershed as close as possible. And that mitigation work is that people can do artificial wetlands. And a lot of them have benefits similar to established wetlands, but they're not always the same. And they don't have those long soil that has been around for a really long time. But we are seeing good progress from some of these artificial wetlands. And a lot of them can bring um, a lot of the benefits, maybe not all of the same benefits as a long-term wetland, But when you mitigate, what you're doing is you're fixing up another area. So I will say this law not only takes away current mitigation, but what it will also do is that then you won't have, or it takes away those wetlands, but then you also won't be able to mitigate. So you're really losing double if you think about it, because right now, or triple, because it's two times right now, so that we don't have a net loss. So instead of mitigating it somewhere else, now you won't even have to, you'll be able to build and you don't mitigate. And so those areas that were then fixed up as a response for the watershed will no longer be fixed up. And it also doesn't make people think like, is this the best way? How do we want to do this? Maybe we build around it, or maybe, we only build on part of the wetland. It doesn't make individuals have to really consider and think about how to deal with the wetlands. So there's lots of companies that mitigate. We work with some. If you want to chat with someone, I'm happy to put you in touch with someone who does that actual mitigation. And there's mitigation banks and some nonprofits and within our area actually do mitigation. We do not at Harpeth Conservancy, but it is commonly done. Our drinking water supply. So 60% of our drinking water comes from our rivers in Tennessee, and pretty much the rest of it comes from our aquifers. Wetlands, when they absorb those floodwaters, first off, they filter out pollution and they improve the water quality. And that's amazing. Then our utilities have to do less work. They have to spend less money. We have to hopefully don't have to pay as much as ratepayers. But our drinking water is recharged by wetlands. So when you look at the Memphis Aquifer, which if you live in the West Tennessee, all you West Tennesseers, you'll have fantastic water. I know I went to Rhodes. I love Memphis water. And that aquifer is recharged by all of these wetlands that are right along the recharge zone. And a lot of those wetlands are potentially at risk as a result of this bill. So if you don't have those wetlands there that are holding on to water, the water slowly seeping through, it's recharging the aquifer. You're losing a source of drinking water that might impact communities in the future. So something we really don't want.
Before we go on, can we just ask one question really quick on developers?
Mhm.
The question is essentially, does a developer need a permit to build on a wetland plus have to mitigate, or is it developers aren't allowed to mitigate or they're not required to? I think there's a little confusion around that.
Yeah, developers can mitigate as well. They do have to get permits. We have a whole permitting system, which we'll do another 101 on in the future because it can be complicated. But yes, you have to get a permit and they can either, buy credits, they can have someone else do it. They can do it themselves. I don't, there are developers that also do mitigation as well. So it's not necessarily separate. So it depends on the circumstances, but yes, they have to get a permit, and yes, they can mitigate themselves, but they have to have special certifications or they have to go through certain processes to do that mitigation work, or show a certain. There's a whole handbook and processes and certifications that people go through who are doing these kinds of mitigations. So we just talked about drinking water. Let's go to they filter pollution. So beyond just filtering out pollution so that we get to spend less money, hopefully, because the utility doesn't need to spend as much money because we have that natural filtration, they also filter out pollution, which helps our unique aquatic diversity and helps, you can imagine all the critters that rely on fresh water and having those wetlands not only cleans out the water for all the fish and mussels and wildlife and all of the larger game that that need those sources as well. And that's how they protect our biodiversity, as I was saying. So, reminder, Duck River, I want to say that a lot of us will want to be talking about the Duck River because it's Tennessee's, if you don't know, it's North America's most aquatically biodiverse river. It's third in the world. So it's a very unique ecosystem. And the duck has around 16,000, I think around, yeah, 16,000 acres of wetland that would be at risk if this were to pass. But it's not just a duck. I mean, it's biodiversity all over that would be lost. A lot of species rely on habitat that is directly in the wetland, whether it's where they breed and they come back to that area or their food sources are in the wetlands. So it's a whole ecosystem. When you get through that, when you get rid of those wetlands, you don't have the full cycles that many animals and creatures need to survive. And our outdoor enjoyment. How many of us love kayaking or walking along the river? Or maybe you love going to Shelby Bottoms if you're in Nashville and get to look at their wetlands. Wetlands are part and parcel to our outdoor activities. So they impact our fishing. And if you don't have them, we lose a lot of money in our state. And we like to make sure that we're not just using ecological arguments because we think, beauty, peace of mind is huge, but it's a huge industry, as you can see here, 799 million. And that's just for anglers in 2023. So when you get rid of these and you don't have those ducks coming through that need wetlands to survive, many species, you don't have the beautiful kayaks, rivers dry up. I will also say we didn't put specifically on here, but not only do they slow down water from rivers when they flood, but they also are a source of water when you have droughts. And lots of farmers even use them in time of droughts and other water sources. But if you don't have those wetlands to recharge our rivers, then you don't have that water. And so a lot of those kayaking and fishing and other activities are not going to be possible in these areas potentially if these wetlands are gone. And these are just some nice facts. I like $13 billion in outdoor recreation. Right now, about 80% of these wetlands are smaller than 1 acre. So these are very small wetlands, but they have a huge impact on the ecosystems. Just because they're small doesn't mean they're not mighty and doesn't mean that they don't have importance in our system. And the numbers are very different depending on it, but wetlands alone are worth billions of dollars, as you can see from this 1.6 to 1.8 billion potentially is how much. So those are just kind of like overarching. These are the reasons you should care about wetlands. These are our main talking points that we're going to be pushing for to protect our wetlands. And that's all I have, unless anyone else has any more questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, given how important and necessary wetlands seem to be, why would a legislator want to remove protections? Like, what is behind this bill? It seems confusing.
He's a developer, yes.
Yeah, I try not to speak to specific legislators' motives, because as y'all know, is what I will say probably more the other training is that no legislator is always your enemy or is always your friend. We don't want to think about it that way. One legislator might agree with you one day and then the next day not agree with you. But a lot of people, and I will say it's not just developers because we work with a ton of developers who are incredible, who understand conservation. They don't want short-term growth at the expense of long-term growth. But not everyone has that ideology or those thoughts. And sometimes people want the easy, lower costs. They don't have to pay those mitigation costs. That means that they can build a lot faster because they don't have to. Maybe they can buy more property because they're not paying to fix that cost. But I will say, you know, someone's paying that cost. And one argument that I want to make sure everyone knows is that we pay that cost. Taxpayers, even if you're not a taxpayer, like everyone will pay that cost. And so for me, it's a question of fairness of who should pay that cost, who's getting the most benefit. And I just make sure you might hear a lot about, well, private property rights. And what I will say to that is private property rights shouldn't extend to your neighbor's property. And so when you're impacting your community and your neighbors, there should be some level of accountability for those kinds of impacts, especially when in Tennessee, our waterways are in the public trust. And so it's our water, all of our water. So if you're going to take something that's going to hurt all of our waterways, especially in a watershed, the least that you should do, in my opinion, is to mitigate and at least fix up somewhere else in the watershed, ideally as close as possible to the area so that everyone doesn't have to deal with the consequences, so that our system is still intact since you're reaping the benefits from that system.
Now, Grace, can developers get carbon credits for preserving the wetlands?
I am not sure about carbon credits. I don't know if Ryan's on the call. Do you know if they do get carbon credits? It's chipmunk. You're chipmunking, Ryan.
Our colleague, Dr. Ryan Jackwood, who is a very serious watershed scientist, often has problems with his
Thank you.
microphone. There you are. My goodness.
I believe carbon credits are traditionally used for like foresting and wetlands. They're really difficult to like harvest the actual timber from wetlands. I mean, you could have like a wetland swamp that would be great at capturing carbon, but I'm not sure if you would be able to get carbon credit or effectively use it within the system. So I'll give you like I don't really think so, but that doesn't mean there are opportunities out there to like maybe make a little extra like carbon credit like money if you did it in a very strategic way. But I just don't think those two programs necessarily mesh very well.
Can you briefly, just for those who aren't aware, explain what a carbon credit is?
Yeah, sure. So, if you're growing a lot of like woody debris, woody trees are really great at capturing CO2 from the atmosphere and they store it in their bark. And so it's like a long-term storage. And so then if you are going to then cut down those trees, use them for lumber or something like that, and regrow that area, that's typically where you're going to get like carbon recapture in that particular like landscape. Again, like, trying to harvest trees in a swamp is going to be a lot more difficult than going to a prairie and planting a row of, pines or something like that.
Great.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I think all of our questions have been answered and we're good.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. For folks who will be attending Conservation Day on the Hill, don't worry, this isn't the last time you'll hear these details. Not only will we send you the one pager, or it's actually a three pager, that Grace just went over at our training next Monday, the night before. We're going to break it down and make it even easier. And we'll provide scripted yep, we'll provide scripts. So it's really easy because I think it's almost too much information for experts to process. And so the expectation here is not that you become an expert on the issue and can answer any and all questions a legislator might have. We just want you to be able to communicate our best talking points, and we will give those to you in an even more concise way.
And I will say, everyone who's on this call, whether or not you're going or not, if you if you bring up these points to someone and that person is like, I don't understand, that legislator doesn't get it. The beauty of that is you don't have to know everything and you don't have to answer every question. It's as simple as saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but let me put you in touch with someone who does. And that's the beauty of having groups like us, that we can answer those questions and we can figure out those if we don't know them. So you don't have to be an expert on these things, but it really matters to be able to explain them and have a meeting with your legislator and break these things down so they realize that it matters to their constituents.
Can I ask
And
a question?
go ahead.
Um, is there any chance that, okay, so under SACIT, there's this definition of isolated. Is there any chance, because of how Tennessee is, that sometimes a wetlands can be isolated and sometimes it's not? Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
so if it's not isolated under the definition, so the
Right,
definition, we know isolated is not actually isolated. There are plenty of
right.
wetlands that will still have protections, that will still have those mitigation requirements, but over 300,000 of them in our state we've identified that don't have that continuous surface water connections, and it's those wetlands that are at risk under
Okay,
this
so
new
it's
bill.
continuous. In other words, you can't make an argument that sometimes it rises and then all of a sudden it's connected. We can't make that argument legally, correct?
That's the problem is, well, they're still in the court system. They're still arguing about what is continuous, and ephemeral streams that come and go are also under threat based on this Supreme Court decision as well. But this bill specifically tackles wetlands that don't have the surface water connection continuously.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Um, Y'all, I'm gonna send you a link in the chat in just a second that will send you to Harpeth Conservancy's website, specifically our Tennessee Wetlands page. It has a lot of the history that Grace just went over, but it also has four brand new videos featuring folks in Tennessee talking about why wetlands matter to them. They're really short. They're between 2 and 4 minutes each, and we'd love for you to not only watch them because we think they're beautiful and tell really great stories, but we'd love for you to share them. So I'm gonna share the link to our website, and when you go there, you'll see the videos. Um, okay, we're gonna move on to the next bill because we are running out of time. And how did that happen already? There's so much to talk about. Next up, I'm gonna point to Maris to talk us through the Tennessee Waste to Jobs Act. Maris, do you want to play the video?
Yeah, I was gonna say, hey everybody. This video was put together by our coalition by Jeffrey Berry, CEO of Tennessee Environmental Council, Ryan Scott, and Shelby White, and it says everything really beautifully in about 7 minutes and paints a really great picture. So I want to play that first and then kind of get into nitty-gritty after that, if that's cool.
Great. Let's do it.
Not hearing anything. Oh,
Billions of pounds of
there we
trash
go.
buried in landfills across Tennessee.
Not in my backyard. That's what people living in Rutherford County are saying about yet another proposal to build more of the Middle Point landfill next to the one that's already there.
Before you can even see the Middle Point landfill, you can smell it.
With the population boom in Middle Tennessee, landfills are filling up fast.
Of all that waste, 75% could be recovered and put back into our economy. But today, Tennessee only recycles about 10% of our waste. We can solve this. There are industries right here in Tennessee that need those materials we are currently sending to our landfills.
Kaiser Aluminum is a semi-fabricated aluminum products company. We manufacture products for aerospace, packaging, general engineering, as well as automotive and markets. So currently what we're facing is 2/3 of our primary aluminum in the United States comes from Canada. On average, $800 million to $1 billion annually worth of aluminum beverage cans hitting the landfills. And because aluminum is infinitely recyclable, we could capture that material and bring it back into our facilities. It would certainly help alleviate a lot of the supply issues that we're dealing with, and we may be dealing with significantly into the future. And the only way to do that is through better state and federal policies.
The aluminum industry has an economic impact of $9 billion annually in Tennessee. Its impacts can be felt across the entire state. In Huntingdon, Grangus operates one of its 3 U.S. aluminum rolling facilities. Grangus is the largest employer in Carroll County with more than 500 employees.
And we're a global foil manufacturing facility. And customers put that in all kinds of applications, everything from HVAC to automotive to flexible packaging, even thinking about all the way down to a Capri Sun or a peanut butter lid. That is the aluminum that you see that comes from our facilities.
We could function almost on 100% recyclable if we can get it to fill our demand. It's really kind of traded like a commodity. It's not a fight, but it's a challenge to find an adequate continuous supply. Beverage cans, turkey basters or pie pans and stuff, that's a lot of aluminum, a lot of a good grade aluminum that we could use. It's a win all around. It's cheaper, it's less electricity, and it's less emissions than converting it from ore out of the ground.
The recycling he's talking about is taking place just east in Dixon, Tennessee at Shapiro Metals.
We get probably 75 to 80% of the materials from Tennessee. We do aluminum, we do stainless, we do coppers, a lot of ferrous, cardboard, some plastics. We'll put it on the line, run it up into the baler, it'll compact it, it'll come out in this form. then it'll go to an end user for melting.
One of those end users is Grangus in Huntingdon, which is how a circular economy works. The waste from one industry provides feedstock for another. Metals are not the only materials in high demand in Tennessee. Just up the road in Weakley County sits the largest ball clay deposit in the United States. 90% of all porcelain tile manufactured in the U.S. includes Tennessee ball clay. Tennessee clay is a key ingredient in the production of ceramic tiles and countertops. Up the road in Clarksville is one of North America's largest tile manufacturing facilities, Florum USA.
Porcelain tile is made primarily of sand, clay, and feldspar. The clay is West Tennessee ball clay. That's why we're here. That's why Tennessee is so popular in the clay industry. The sand, though, we could substitute in glass because it's chemically the same. So bottled glass would be a great source for us to have post-consumer content in our tile. I think it's important to understand the scale of the industry in Tennessee and the scale of industry here at Florum. We could take every bottle landfilled in Tennessee today, and so we would still have to buy glass.
From Crossville to Clarksville, thousands of Tennesseans are employed in our ceramic tile industry. Florum, the tile manufacturer, needs the glass, but currently we don't have the recycling infrastructure in place to capture that glass. Right down the road in Old Hickory, Recycle Services is trying to meet that demand.
Recycle Services located specifically to Tennessee because there is a great amount of glass that is not being recycled, and there's a huge demand for recycled glass. And the reason why recycled glass is so valuable is that when it's cleaned and processed appropriately, it's easier to melt and so is more efficient. You're not remining sand and limestone to create new glass products. And so there's many benefits to the environment and to our businesses.
So there's demand for our aluminum and our glass, but what about plastics? A straight shot down I-65 in Troy, Alabama is KW Plastics.
KW Plastics is headquartered in Troy, Alabama, and we are considered the world's largest plastics recycler. Companies like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Toyota, GM, they need post-consumer recycled material, and we would love to be able to supply them with that. We know that there is much more plastic that we could be getting from Tennessee, that we could be purchasing from communities in Tennessee. Not only would I love to buy more, I need to buy more. But without a system in place, without infrastructure in place, then it's getting lost. That we literally are burying billions of dollars worth of plastic containers in our landfills. This really is economic development. It's about being a good steward of the resources that we have and maximizing what we already have.
We had to go outside of Tennessee to Columbus, Ohio to find a real-world example of the future of recycling. This $100 million facility processes and recycles over 250,000 tons of municipal solid waste per year. In order to bring this degree of investment to Tennessee, our state lawmakers are currently considering the Tennessee Waste to Jobs Act. This legislation will generate millions of dollars for recycling infrastructure, reduce our reliance on materials from foreign countries, create thousands of Tennessee jobs, and help solve our landfill crisis at no cost to Tennessee taxpayers. Tennessee is well positioned to become a regional economic powerhouse and a leader in recycling. Please support the Tennessee Waste to Jobs Act.
Yay! I just want to say, first of all, Senator Campbell is on the call, and I knew she jumped on so that she could say hi. And I wanted to give her a chance if she was. Are you able to?
Hey guys. I actually am in the car on my way somewhere, but I just I couldn't help jumping on. Great presentation, Grace, on the wetlands. Thank you. I learned a lot myself, so thank you so much. And also thank you guys for supporting the Duck River and Tennessee Waste to Jobs. And when you come up to the legislature, please stop by my office and say hi. And thank you, Mira. You're awesome.
Yay! Thank you for being here, Heidi. Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So y'all, I already know everybody on this call is so pumped about this, probably just as pumped as I have been for a couple years now, because this bill has been introduced, was introduced last session, and they are familiar with it. We changed it up a little bit, so it's a different name. Tennessee Waste to Jobs paints this picture. As you saw in the video, we are showing legislators that we need the material. And as you heard KW Plastics say in the end, we don't have the infrastructure to get these materials to the places they need to go. And what Tennessee Waste to Jobs does is creates the infrastructure by including the brands or the producers of packaging waste, which is filling up our landfills. So actually, if you would yeah, let's go ahead and look and see. There's Heidi. Senator Campbell and Representative Freeman are carrying this bill, and there are the bill numbers there. And you can go to the next slide. I did want to add here that where it is and let you guys in that it is moving to the Government Operations Committee next week, which is basically the Senate and the House both have a Government Operations Committee that will hear of this bill and make a recommendation to the Energy and Ag committees that will ultimately determine the votes going to the floor. So it's incredibly important to make sure that those committees know and are familiar with this bill. So you can see on the left, we do have some supporters. Senator Kyle and Oliver signed on, and on the House side, Representative Halsey signed on, which is really big for us. And I know that we are waiting on a few confirmations for some more, but this is where we're at, and we're building momentum pretty quickly. Next slide. So if you didn't catch this, and many of you probably think, well, yeah, recycling isn't so great in Tennessee. We are 48th in the nation and with a 12% recycling rate, and we're putting over 900,000 tons of packaging waste in the landfill. And that was actually done by the Recycling Partnership State of Recycling report. So we know we know we've got a problem. Next slide. And nobody wants a landfill in their backyard. Look at that. Landfills are filling up to capacity, and there's actually a law in place called the Jackson Law that allows municipalities to say we don't want a landfill if it's proposed in their backyard and proposed in their county. So it's extremely hard to expand these landfills, and nobody wants them anyway. And you're going to need more money to transport them out of state, and we're going to have to transport them farther away. So we're running out of time, we're running out of space, and a landfill is a hole in the ground where you just throw a bunch of stuff in it. I don't think that's ever been a big solution in my eyes, or a sustainable solution. Next slide. So what the Tennessee Waste to Jobs Act does is it shifts the cost of recycling from taxpayers and municipalities to the brands and producers producing the waste. So what does that mean in simpler terms? You and I, we're the consumers. We buy these products, and whether or not we don't have any control over the plastic or the glass or the aluminum that it comes in, but these brands they're producing at such a massive rate that we don't have the infrastructure to get all of this material and get it through the system and get it back to them, which they want that material. As you heard from different industries across Tennessee and the Southeast, they need these materials to create more product from recycled products. And that's their goal. Their sustainability goals and all that. They know that they need this product for the future. And what we're doing is we're painting more of a picture, an economic picture for legislators to show them that this would really generate millions of dollars for Tennessee. This would create thousands of jobs for Tennessee. So despite the fact that this is an obvious problem with the landfills, this would actually be something that the brands are working with us to do. And I want to explain it in a little bit more. Can you go to the next slide? Because I think that, yeah, there's a term for this. It's called extended producer responsibility, and you might hear that. It's called EPR. We kind of want to stay away from these words or this word just because, sorry, my dog wants to play with the most loud toy. Give this to me. Stop. It's already happening across the world. So EPR, extended producer responsibility, is a fancy word for just saying we're sharing the burden of figuring out what to do with these materials with the brands that are creating the materials, which seems pretty logical to me. So that, this is something that's happening already. It's going on already, and it's going to happen in the US, whether we like it or not. Next slide. And it's already being done. So we've got 5 states now that have passed EPR legislation, and basically these blue states have they have more of a top-down regulatory way of going about it, meaning the government has put in place these regulations and saying you have to abide by these rules, whether you like it or not. Here's what we want from you. You have to do it regardless. Whereas the bill we've created is actually more from a grassroots up. And we've actually gotten a lot of these brands to support the bill and write the bill with us so that they're happy, we're happy, and everybody is kind of working together already to share that responsibility. Next slide. So we could be a leader in the Southeast. We could be the first Republican state to pass this bill. And that's a huge, huge win for Tennessee. I mean, they basically we're giving them the opportunity to make the bill work. And that's how this works in general. There's an opt-in. There's an option for counties with less than 200,000 as a population. And why we did that was because we realized that not every county is ready to do something like this. And we did get some feedback from legislators that maybe it would be better to make this more permissive. And so again, we're finding ways to compromise so that counties are happy, legislators are happy, businesses are happy. We want to make sure that this is a win-win-win for everybody. Next slide. Look at all these supporters we have already. Unilever, Nestle, and Danone and Mars. These are big producers that are already doing EPR. They're already sharing the responsibility, and the expectation for them is already a lot higher. So this would be amazing to pass so that we have all of these producers on the same playing field. Like they're all being held accountable, right? Because if only a few are doing the right thing, how is that really fair, right, to the rest of the industry? Next slide. So this slide really has it all. This is a lot of, these are some talking points for you all that really will kind of narrow down when we get closer to Conservation Day. But since we have the time, I figured let's talk about them all. We're going to create thousands of new jobs. We're going to bring in millions of dollars in revenue for Tennessee, save municipalities and taxpayers money because this isn't coming from the taxpayer. Remember, we're already paying for solid waste disposal and we're not reaping the benefits of that. So we're relieving taxpayers the burden of managing this growing packaging waste problem. We're extending the lives of landfills so we don't have to expand them. We don't have to find more places to throw trash into a hole. We're expanding recycling to all Tennesseans because those counties under 200,000 are going to want in after they see what's going on. And then we're enticing manufacturers and industry to come to Tennessee to the growing interest of recycled material. Because listen, with tariffs and the current administration, we're not really sure what's going to happen with getting steel and all these different things from outside of the country. We want to support domestic growth in that sense. So this would be really a great thing for Tennessee to start now and reduce our reliance on foreign materials. So when we pass this bill, a lot of questions come up, and I think the next one actually has the questions, but I think what most people want to know is, right, how does this work? Who pays for this? Will costs go up for consumers? Who's in control? So if you go back to the last slide, the PRO is something that you'll hear. It's formed when we pass this bill, when we pass Tennessee Waste to Jobs, the first thing that happens is a PRO is formed. So Producer Responsibility Organization is in other words, it's these producers coming together and forming a group. There's currently one in the US already. So we select a PRO, the Circular Action Alliances. I'm giving you a lot of information that is just going to kind of give you this roundabout vision. But the PRO is really the nonprofit organization that creates the plan. And what they do is they work with TDEC, who works with an advisory board, and they create a needs assessment. What do we need? What kind of goals do we want to have? We build upon the current municipality and we map out our strategy to get to these goals. Do we need more trucks? Do we want to build transfer stations, upgrade the MRFs? So what is that going to cost? And we create this budget. And as we go through and look at all these things, this is a huge process. So just imagine, like, this is going to take a year or two to get this all together. And what we need to do is, once this plan is finished, we're going to create a fee schedule. And with the fee schedules, that's where the producers actually pay into the process. And that's the biggest part, is that these producers are paying basically by the amount that they create or they produce and the kind of materials that they're producing. So the more recyclable it is, the less in the fees. They'll be rewarded there. If they're producing less material, it incentivizes them because they're not going to have to pay as much into the pro. But this is all over a long period of time, and it incentivizes all these different producers to be on the same page. And now all that money is put back into our infrastructure. I see hands. I see hands. Do you want to ask the questions now, or I'm pretty much almost done? So if you go back to the last slide really quick, I just want to touch on a few things. Who pays for this? Who pays for this? Even after that whole presentation, we're still going to get questions. Who pays for this? The pro pays for this, right? The pro and the fees that are enacted through this whole system, that's where the money comes from. But then they ask, well, will costs go up for the consumer? Because throughout that process, if their costs go up, the producers, will they be charging consumers? No. Studies have been done on this. The fraction will be so tiny, if any at all. But that's the thing, is this is already happening. Remember, this is already happening in the US or across the world. So these are already baked in. These small increases are already baked in to the prices that we're paying. And also, prices are going to go up either way, right? With administration that we have now, we know that prices are going to go up. So wouldn't we rather get ahead of the game and start this process so that we can funnel that money here? Who's in control? The pro and TDEC and advisory board work together, and it's really a checks and balances, just like democracy. Like it's really built so that they can make a plan that works for Tennessee and works for us and works for the environment. Next slide. In conclusion, well, great, win-win-win. Everybody wins. The consumers of the product win, the businesses, and also the earth, right? We don't want any more landfills. So triple win is what we want. Next slide. And then this is what I'll leave you with. This is the elevator pitch, right? This is a piece of legislation that offers a sustainable funding source that plays a crucial role in addressing the landfill crisis. It will create thousands of jobs and generate millions of dollars for Tennessee, while also stimulating the local circular economy, supplying valuable materials to the industries in need. So we painted that picture. We're letting legislators know how much we need this to happen now so that we can start this whole process. And I think the last slide is just a QR code so that you guys can you can watch the video as many times as you want and kind of check out the one-page fact sheet that we have on there. But go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Jess.
All right, we have a whole bunch of questions, including several about, let me scroll all the way back up.
I can read them too. Yeah, like
That's
where are
fine.
you starting at?
So the first one was about the location of the facilities. Where would they exist? And would they also exist? I believe the question was kind of further asked, would they exist in counties with less than 200,000 in population? And
great question.
Yeah, I think she may want to extrapolate on that a little bit because she's got her hand up. So.
Oh, go ahead, Sigrid. See, is it Sigrid?
Yeah, it is Sigrid. I was just unmuting and gonna get my hand down. Yeah, she basically summed it up appropriately. So will the smaller counties, I did see that someone named Zach mentioned something about being able to opt out of it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I can totally answer that. Basically, so Sigrid, that would actually be all up to the plan when they start assessing what we need. So the 200,000 opt-in option, this is basically we're allowing us to focus on those denser places first, and any other counties opting into just the legislation being EPR. Like this is opting into the system. There's no set in stone plan yet of where the MRFs are going, or like what kind of technology we want to upgrade, or what we need specifically. That's all created once this legislation is passed. So they start assessing where they want to do these things. But so to your question, if the smaller counties, and I know Heidi's on here too, and I know Scott's here too to answer his question, but those smaller counties are under 200,000. If they're not opted in yet, then they are not going to be included in the overall plan in that moment. It's going to focus on all the counties that are opted in and those over 200,000.
And maybe
So who decides, I guess I'm not understanding. So who decides when they're opted in?
the,
At
the
what
local
juncture?
counties would.
The counties, like so the mayors and
It's
the people in
permissive
charge.
legislation, Sigrid. So, a county that wants to participate would pass a resolution saying that they want to participate, they want to opt into this legislation. And we think that a lot of counties, that are not included in the initial rollout of the legislation, a lot of counties are suffering right now. Taxpayers are being burdened with the cost of maintaining convenience centers that are trying to supply services for recycling to their constituents, to their taxpayers. And so once they see that money is available to help their counties better provide those services, we feel that they'll opt in very quickly.
Right. And we'd be happy to we can talk more, Sigrid, offline, but basically we just want to get the nuts and bolts of this to you guys so that you can email me or ask, any of us more questions as we go along. But that's a great question. But just so that other people get a chance to ask, was there another one?
Yeah,
I think, Mary, there's probably a lot of questions, but I'm going to cut us off because we have
So we can get to
7
the next
minutes.
one.
We have 8 minutes to talk about the third bill. But all of the materials we're sharing tonight we'll share in a follow-up email. So rest assured you'll receive all the info tonight, and we'll talk more about these next Monday.
I'll try to type in some answers too.
Great. Scott, this is our third bill. And just to be clear, you guys, the first bill, the wetlands bill, we don't like it. The second bill, we love it. We think it's great. This bill, we don't really like this one either. And Scott's going to tell us why.
All right. Well, I'm glad that I got the easiest bill to say no to, and it ties into a lot of what we're talking about already. I'm going to hopefully share my screen here so that you can see the link I just put into the chat goes to this same document. And I am not as well prepared necessarily as the rest of the group because this is a bill that's kind of in motion. And we're hoping that, as we get more people's eyes on it, it's going to maybe be easier to talk legislators into not doing what's proposed here. What's being proposed here is to get rid of a provision that has been in our State Scenic Rivers Act since 1990 that prohibits the placement, or it creates a buffer of 2 miles from expanding or new landfills and scenic rivers that are designated as Class 2 in the state of Tennessee. And you can see here on my screen, like the list of those rivers that are currently categorized under that Class 2 pastoral river areas. The reason that this has been done, and it's clear in the legislation, the intent of the legislation in 1990 was to protect our scenic rivers from the very easily foreseeable damages that might occur to them from the placement of a landfill in close proximity to them. And that's either through groundwater, as we talked about with wetlands. It's not always on the surface. In Tennessee, a lot of things go down into the ground and pop up in the closest river to them. And that's the case with landfills, where we do try to engineer them to keep things inside of them and not leaking into the ground. That doesn't always work. The reason that this legislation is being brought is due to the passage last year, or the addition last year, of portions of the Duck River in Murray County to the Class 2 scenic rivers list, largely because people are concerned about the development of what was proposed as a 385-acre landfill right on the banks of the most biodiverse river in North America. And there was bipartisan support to, actually put the Class 2 scenic river designation on that portion of the Duck River.
understanding that that would keep this company from Louisiana from building a landfill there. Now there are certain people that want to roll that back, and so this one is super easy. The message is just protect our scenic rivers, vote no on this bill. And keep in mind that as Tennessee, hopefully we pass the Waste to Jobs Act so we have less pressure on landfills, but we are approaching a period of time where we're going to see several very large landfills that provide a lot of the waste disposal needs of Tennessee coming up on the end of their lifespans. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to build new landfills in Tennessee. And this is one of the laws, again, that we put on our books explicitly to protect our rivers from new and expanding landfills. They're trying to roll that back now. So I think that's all I have to say on that. If people have any questions. And again, I put that link in the chat and we can do that again so that you can go and read all about that.
So I think one thing I'm learning is an hour is too quick. An hour is too daggum quick. But we know that folks are really busy and there's so much going on and we want to be able to spend time with our families. So we've got 2 minutes left. And with those 2 minutes, we'll see if there are any, is there any deeply burning questions?
Well, Ryan has a deeply burning question. I'm going to say, Ryan, you should go talk to Dory about that.
But I wanted you to answer it, Scott.
So there was a landfill proposed on Bell outside of Bell's Bend on the river just north of Nashville, and that is what they came to as a determination for not allowing that landfill to be there. It could be, and just to be totally open here, it could be an arbitrary number, 2 miles, but the purpose is clear.
Epic. Okay, well, here's what's going to happen next. As soon as I hop off of this, I'm going to email every single person who registered for this event, and I'm going to include all the materials that folks shared tonight, so you'll have access to those. If you are coming to Conservation Day on the Hill, we would love to see you on the Monday night training. At the training, we actually won't go into more detail. Rather, we will hammer down exactly the details that you will need for your meetings because the meetings are so fast. That's why we're going to give you a script. For Conservation Day on the Hill, the expectation with each legislator is that you do cover all three bills in your meeting, but that's why we're going to provide a script that make sure you get those high points. Good question, Amanda. So the Monday night training is hybrid. For those of you who are in Nashville or who won't be in Nashville on Monday night, you're welcome to join by Zoom. You likely, if you likely already have, let's see, nope, I'm gonna have to share that. I'm gonna share the Zoom link to all the folks who have registered for Conservation Day on the Hill in my second email this week, so that you'll have that Zoom link. For those who are joining us in person, we'll be at the Nashville Food Project. More information about that to come. That was rapid fire, but I hope we're feeling maybe slightly better than before. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a
Legislative
lot,
session.
but we did it.
Right. So those are our three bills. Like Grace said, there are lots, and I mean lots of other bills that are going through legislature right now that have to do with the environment. The partner orgs who planned this event chose these three because we thought these were the three that we could use your help with the most. But there are lots of ways to get involved even after Conservation Day on the Hill. I'm gonna skip to the slide where it has my email or all of our emails so that you can, well, am I sharing anymore? No, I'm not. forget that. I'll share the slides that has all our email addresses so you can reach out to us. But I do want to say that Scott Barrenberry, the one and only, and our CEO, Grace Stranch at Harpeth Conservancy, host a weekly legislative meeting on Thursdays from 5 to 6. It is also a rapid fire, very short hour-long meeting. But if you're curious about what those other bills are that are happening, you're welcome to join.
So Marie, I just put the link in the chat to my list of all bills that I'm watching this year, and it is extensive. But at the beginning of it, on the first page, is an invite, information on that call that we have every Thursday. And everybody is welcome.
Great. Appreciate y'all.
Yay.
See you soon. Go Tennessee.
Awesome
Go
job, guys.
Tennessee. Thank you guys. That was a good little, like,
Rapid fire.
practice round there.